You are about to receive messages that may be harmful to your mental state. Your sense of reality will be questioned. Your view on things will be altered. You are now part of the meta. The meta controls everything. The meta determines what will and will not happen. You are watching the Meta Show.
And good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Meta Show. This is our post-Valentine's Day edition, so I've got my
Oh
pink
my God,
tie.
there's fucking red dots on it. Oh my God, there's red dots everywhere. Oh my God.
We have
I
to
am
know
the
what's
first.
new on the screen,
I didn't
right?
know. I literally did not know that they had planned this on the show. This is my, I did not know they were doing this. This is horrifying. They're fucking everywhere, and now I see why everybody is so fucking mad. Jesus Christ, this is horrible. This is horrible. Is there an off button?
Every time you move anything around. At least I didn't make the noise for you guys. So.
God.
Anyway, welcome to the Meta Show. It is our post-Valentine's Day edition. We've got a big show lined up for you guys today. We've got two great guests, Caleb and Dunk Dinkle. We've got a lot of information to go over, and hopefully not all of it will make your eyes glaze over. But the most important thing we have is a very big announcement from our colleagues who are setting up eVegas in October. Mittens, take it away.
Alrighty, so we are going to be going back to Brisk's Soapbox. We have a lot of soapboxy things, and we've got a bunch of really cool guests that we're going to be talking to today. So we've got a big show. Not only are we going to talk about Pearl Abyss, we're going to be talking about what the hell has happened to Eve, and why are there red dots everywhere, and just what the fuck. But I think it would be cool if we talked about good news to begin with, and that good news is eVegas 2020, which I just got done on the fireside talking to everybody. Hyper Viper has done yeoman's work on this and has agreed to be our next victim and be a guest on the Meta Show next week, and is going to talk about all of this in more detail. But CCP said that they weren't going to do Vegas anymore, and as anybody who's ever been to Vegas knows, that the people who are really responsible for truly making eVegas happen are the awesome volunteers who have been essentially running all of the structure of eVegas for many years now. And the player base really sort of came together and said, you know, we're going to make sure that Vegas happens. By God, this is not going to stop. We must continue the party. And I am delighted to announce and I had nothing to do with this. Like, this is not like I have not been working on this. This is all Hyper Viper and the awesome volunteers with eVegas who make this happen. That they have a date, that they have a venue, that this shit is happening on, let's see, between October 23rd and 24th. And if we can link that in the channel, please, so everybody can see it. Excellent, thank you. So there are a couple things I want everybody to know. This is not just like an Imperium party, right? Because the eVegas volunteer crew that are making this happen are from a number of alliances. But one of the things that is very, very important, if you go to this, I just found this out. I knew that Hyper Viper was going to be doing a lot of arrangements, but just before the fireside chat that I was giving today, I found out that Hyper Viper has really stuck his neck out for the community, i.e., he found a venue and he got a block discount rate at the venue where we're going to be doing this thing in October. And he has basically put it on, essentially said he is on the hook for these hotel rooms, right? Like, if we do not get the people, we're going to have more than 100 people easily just from the Imperium. But if you are going to eVegas, please do not do what I used to do when I was at the link. I would go off to like the Cosmo or something like that. I'm getting a hotel room through the official site. I am going to be in the official place, and the official policy of the state, if you're part of the Imperium, you already heard this in a fireside chat, is that we are all going to make sure that Hyper Viper does not get screwed by sticking his neck out for this community. It's bigger than the Imperium. It's about all of us in Eve and making sure that we all get to party and do a bunch of stupid shit in eVegas, no matter what CCP says or does. So be there or be lame. If it's a really good room rate, and if you have any issues with getting the money together for that, just get together with your friends, and you can get 3 or 4 people in a room, and it'll be cheap and it'll be fun, and we're doing it. So no like cool kids, we're going to go to the Cosmopolitan or whatever. We're all going to go to the same place. We're going to make sure that Hyper Viper is taken care of and gets the appropriate level of thanks, along with all of the other volunteers that deserve thanks for making sure that eVegas 2020 is fucking happening, boys and girls. It is happening, and I am fucking pumped. And congratulations to Hyper Viper, congratulations to Greg Al, congratulations to all of the volunteers that have helped make this possible. Yeah, it's pretty fucking badass, and I'm really looking forward to it. I will be there with my finest red shirt on, and I will do what I did last year and try to consume as many legal, as much drugs and alcohol as I can pack into my system, and then food, and then just do whatever I can to indulge every single depravity that is available in Vegas. So it'll be party, be there or be square. And now with the fun, awesome, cool stuff out of the way, unfortunately, I'm going to have to hand things over to Brisk, and it's been a really weird week in EVE Online. Things are a little strange over there. So yeah,
And,
Yikes.
and
What
you
you
know,
got,
the
man?
frustrating thing is I feel like we repeat ourselves ad nauseum in the Eve community about stuff that we don't like to see. And so normally my rants, depending on the week, I don't like to be a downer all the time. I don't like to just crap on CCP or crap on this group or that group. I want to be a good guy and give attaboys, like I gave attaboys in the past for when I thought CCP was doing good stuff and making good changes. But then things happened like last Tuesday. And of the things that happened last Tuesday, I think there's some things that were great that were included in the patch notes that we were all happy to see. There was another round of Tiraside, module Tiraside, and we got the Guardians Gala, and they put the stuff in for wormholers, and as far as I can tell so far, the wormholers seem to be happy. But at the same time, they broke a bunch of stuff. And again, we didn't get full patch notes on the day of the release because of the mining anomaly changes, which were super secret. So of course, it didn't go up on CC, and what happens? We get a giant turd of a buggy release that is still bugged today, and they broke so many things that were so fundamental to the game that I'm trying to figure out what exactly, what did they do any QA? What happened here? All right, let me give you just a short list of the stuff that they broke that affected me, and I'm sure it affected you. One, they broke Fleet Boss. You could not change who the fleet boss was in your fleets. And anybody that's been in a standing fleet knows some knucklehead's going to get it. He's going to be AFK, and you're not going to be able to change the fleet stuff for hours, and you're going to have to recreate a new fleet. They were making us do that every single time until they fixed it. How do you break that? How do you break something that fundamental? You couldn't fleet invite with a right click either. You couldn't warp your fleet to wings or to members. If you're the FC and you're trying to fleet warp everybody, you couldn't do it if you're trying to warp to another player. That's basic fundamental stuff that's critical. How does that get missed in QA? That's the kind of thing that should never break. Customs offices didn't appear in the right-click menu, so good luck warping to one of those. Your clone status wasn't updating if you didn't when you were logged in. That kind of sucks when you're trying to see where your clones are. If you're logged into the game, it's only updating when you log out. Well, great, that gives people an excuse to log out. Not the best thing in the world. Stack all in containers didn't work. I mean, seriously. And finally, the one thing that drove me most crazy, and I put it on Reddit, and it's still affecting me, anybody that plays this game that is either using a 4K monitor or is old or is an old guy using a 4K monitor and can't see very well and has to scale the UI up past 100, well, guess what? Your selection of items is fucked up. You're going to try to scroll and drag and do things to try to collect, to pick things up in your inventory, and it's not going to work. And that's still busted today. I don't know what the issue is there. I don't know how you break that either. Clicking and dragging and highlighting stuff with a click and drag has been in computers since I was 10 years old, and I'm not that young anymore. How do you mess that up? So in the end, it's like, guys, I understand you're trying to be coy. You don't want to release something that has significant impact on the gameplay and on economics that's going to send the markets going crazy, that's exactly what happened, and I'll show you that later when we talk about it. I understand you want to be coy about it. But if you're going to be coy, you better make sure everything else that you're not putting up for testing on CC works. And you didn't do that this time. Don't do it again. Second thing, red dots everywhere, and you guys knew it was
what
coming.
The fuck?
Because I made the joke and I put it in here, and it was on Open Comms last night. It's all over Reddit. I live in mortal fear of these red dots. They're on my iPhone. Every time I get a notification, it drives me crazy. I have to clear them. I have an OCD about it. I don't know about you guys, but I totally do, and I need to clear it whenever I see it. I hate these red dots. And this goes back to something that, and I'm sure Dunk can attest to this because I'm sure it was brought up, this CSM, but almost every CSM, including the one that I was on, CCP makes changes to the UI. This is a 15-year-old game. We are set in our ways. We like the UI the way it is. There are still people that want to go back to the colored UI symbols that haven't been in the game for almost 10 years now. And you're making changes like this that annoy the shit out of people. If you're going to do that, please, for the love of God, let us opt out. Give a button that says use old system or turn off notifications or no fucking red dots. I don't care what it says in the tooltip. Just do it. And if I can't believe that you can't add something like that. If you can turn it on, you got to be able to turn it off. Just give people the opportunity to keep the game looking the way that they want it to look and that it has looked because they're used to it. Maybe some people like the red dots. I don't know. Some people like soccer. I can't explain that either. But the fact is, for the most of us, it drives us crazy. And I'd love to see it go away. So in the future, please, if you're going to make a UI change, make it so that we can turn it off and on as we're going to go. But I don't want to spend all of my time complaining. The last thing I'm going to say is this. Sandra Stone, you should put pith A's on your super carrier, not pith C's. Stop being poor. And that's my rant.
I gotta respond to this because, we don't often have a meta show where, I get to play good cop, right? And it's nice. So in our little rants at the start of the show, I get to be like, hey guys, Vegas is awesome. And then, brisk bad cop. But I just want to tell a little story about the red dots and like how it sort of like messed with my week, even though I am famous for not really logging into EVE Online and thus technically not really being affected by the red dots. The mining nerf seemed really, and we're going to be talking about this in a moment. This is going to be the segue to that. Is we have, it was such an extreme thing, and we're going to be going into the economic impact and the analysis of that, and basically just trying to read the tea leaves because, the EVE ecosystem is such an extraordinarily complicated thing that the nerf to mining anomalies was so extreme that in many ways, I genuinely do not know what is going to happen. And I spent most of this week asking any one of my finance or industry people to try to explain to me in small words that a humble mitten can understand what the hell is going to come down the pipe as a consequence of this. And one of the things that I was really concerned about at the start of this was, oh God, there's going to be a riot, right? Like, the game is sort of in this sort of state where I'm like, my God, if the price of all T1 goods doubles inside of a week, the player base is going to flip their shit. And then it just so happened that the red dot thing was so excruciating to everyone that basically, in a way, it was almost a good thing because people were so mad about the fucking red dots that people did not panic or torches and pitchforks, and people have a chance to think and try to figure out what the hell is going to happen to the economy. But it was really interesting because I want people to put this into perspective. CCP has basically done a 95 to 99% or something nerf on mining across all of nullsec, which has all of these knock-on effects that we genuinely do not understand. This is something that CCP previously needed a actual university professor in high-level macroeconomics to comprehend. It's just insane. I can't get it myself. And at the same time, they put in a feature that was so goddamn annoying that everybody was busy being mad about the red dot that we haven't really had a chance to get to the general what the fuck about the mining stuff until now, which Brisk, I guess let's move on to their next segment. We're gonna dive into this shit.
Our top story today obviously is the mining changes. I'd like to welcome Dunk Dinkle and Caleb Ariana to the show. Dunk, as you guys may know, is with Brave. He is our CSM 14 representative. As Mitten said, he's one of our favorite, mostly nonpartisan CSM reps. And Caleb is the co-host of Push to Talk. He is a market and finance guy who you guys have probably seen on some of these shows, whether it's Talking in Stations or Push to Talk or otherwise on INN. So, gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good to be here.
Mining changes. Can one of you guys walk us through the changes that were made Tuesday and then the changes that were teased with moon mining?
Sure, I can go over the basics if you want, and Caleb.
Let's hear it.
Well, I think the first change that was significant was for people who don't mine in ore anomalies, the size of the asteroid that's in the anomaly matters a lot to Rorqual miners. They want the largest possible asteroid because it has to make sense for them to use their excavator drones on large rocks so they get the most benefit out of it. And what was done is the ore anomalies are now all no longer have large rocks at all. So in basically, to sum up, the use of Rorquals in ore anomalies has basically been removed. There's no reason to put one in on the field, maybe for boosts, but putting that much capital on the field when you can put an Orca or a Porpoise. So basically they've taken the role of Rorquals in ore anomalies and just kind of moved Rorqual's role completely out of that. So that's the asteroid size change. Any questions about that?
No, that seems like a pretty big change. I mean, that's you're nullifying.
Like
people who spent billions of ISK.
So
on
again, yeah, right. I totally get it, but I think you've heard people complaining about Rorquals. This appears to be CCP's attempt to nerf the Rorqual without nerfing the Rorqual. They're nerfing the ore anomalies. So the next change.
You go, please.
I'd just like to point out that that's kind of what's needed, right? Because what you're basically describing is something that you could classify as the gorging problem, right? The Rorqual was brought in with this massive mining capability, and it pretty much made the big roids the only thing that you were feeding on, right? This is the actual opposite of the old school grazing, where you had lots of roids and you had to cycle through all of them and clear an entire belt. The old school strip mining, right? That took a lot of time.
Yes, but I will tell you the way people mine in nullsec now is they clear those anomalies completely. They clear every single rock. So when you're clearing a colossal or an enormous, you're clearing every rock. You may have the Rorquals leave at the end when there aren't very many rocks left to lock onto, so they can't panic. But they will have to clear. That's where you get what's called ochre drama, is people don't want to clear the not valuable rocks. So people in the past, up till this patch, were clearing the anomalies completely. So.
And many, I will say this, many of the larger alliances, I know the Imperium has this rule, and it as part of the Imperium has this rule. I think other groups have this rule. We have rules. You got to clear the ochre first. Before you get on any other rocks, you got to clear out the ochre. And then we also ask that people clear out the mercoxide as well. That way, all of the junk ore, and frankly, ochre used to be pretty good until they nerfed the noxium that was in it. We do that so that you can cycle these anomalies. And I think for me, and to Dunk's point about the Rorqual changes, this was not a nerf to Rorquals because they didn't change the yield or anything about the ship. They changed the size of the ore. And that's not how we've seen CCP act in the past. In the past, they have had no problems increasing the size of excavator drones, making them very expensive, decreasing the yield of excavator drones, and otherwise, tinkering with the way that Rorquals work to make them less effective. This is the first time that they've hit the, at least as I can recall, something like changing the size of the mining anomaly ore itself. They've changed the timing and how often they respawn and how quickly you can clear them. But this is the first time they've changed the size, and that's different. And I think that also it's the biggest of the changes that I think is going to impact Rorks. And I think that there are a lot of people that have invested a lot of time and a lot of money into these ships who now are sitting on caches of 2, 5, 6, 10 billion ISK ships, depending on the fit and what they're carrying, that are no longer useful for what they're used for. And that's got to be frustrating for a lot of players.
I got a question here that I want to jump in, and this is going to be directed at Dirk, not Dirk, Dunk. There's lots of Dirks and Dunks in EVE, it turns out. What I'd like to know, and this is a CSM question, so I don't know if you can tell me the answer because I'm going to ask you about a potential communication. When CCP does something, oftentimes the question is, did they talk to the CSM? But in this case, because I genuinely do not know what is going to happen to the EVE economy, and I think that a lot of people that are not super into the economic warfare side of EVE, we've got a great finance team in Goonswarm, but I just don't understand numbers at a certain level. And I know that more is better, and that's about it as far as my little brain goes. But one of the questions that I have for you from a CSM perspective is this: if CCP talked to the CSM about this at all, have they given any indication as to what they expect the effect on the economy to be in the short to medium term? Or because from an outside perspective, it seems almost like they're just kind of bashing things with a crowbar and maybe breaking stuff and promising to fix it later. I want to know if they have an economic theory that they have communicated to the representatives of the player base as to what the anticipated impact on the EVE economy from these changes will be. Do they have a plan? Do they have an expectation? Do they have a model of any kind that they have shown the CSM? And can you give us any insight on that, please, Tom?
I will be extremely careful in what I say with counsel standing by. As I have communicated in my CSM blogs, there have been discussions with the CSM and CCP about what we'll call the ecosystem of EVE. And those discussions are mainly occurring at a strategic conceptual level, I'll say. There are strategic and conceptual goals of what CCP is doing that they have posted about. They've posted this Moon Mineral Distribution Dev blog. Those are the kind of things that discussions are happening. And people who have been on the CSM before know that often CCP likes to talk at the conceptual and strategic level, and they want to leave the tactical implementation kind of to CCP folks, which can sometimes not lead to the best circumstances. But there is discussion with the CSM and CCP about the ecosystem of EVE at a high level, and that's what I can say about it.
I mean, just to be clear, I don't know too much about macroeconomics or high finance, but I do know enough to know that, because I was on the CSM when Dr. Aosh, who was a professor at the University of Reykjavik, that came on board. So top tier academic, actual professional academic economist who engaged in a lot of macroeconomic modeling, particularly, and I'm not under NDA anymore, so I can talk about all this because it's more than 5 years ago. It was all related to particularly how to manage Plex as a reserve currency, and a whole lot of things that went into just really high-level stuff. And it involves modeling, it involves metrics, it involves running scripts and coming up with reams of data like actual economists do. And so Dunk can't say this, but when I hear strategic and conceptual, what I am not hearing is specific or modeled or data-based or evidence-based. And that's fucking terrifying, because at a certain level, the EVE economy is so complex.
Let me just pause you. So, CCP does have a data science team. They have given presentations at various events. Let me see if I can remember his CCP name. CCP Larrikin has given several public talks from the data science perspective of all the data. So CCP has the ability to gather enormous amounts of data. And,
in the past, but not relating to this specific thing.
Well, I can't speak to what's going on currently.
All right.
What I can say is they have the capability to it. And what I have learned both in real life and in e-life is the interpretation of data is just as complicated as the gathering of data. And so two people can look at any kind of statistics and to draw two different determinations of what it means from them. So CCP is very data driven at this point. They've talked about it, and I, for one, have seen them using data. We don't always agree on the interpretation, but they are using a lot of data to make these decisions.
And it's because they have a little bit of a handicap when it comes to things like what Mittens was talking about when you're looking at things like Plex, because we don't have a static population in the game, right? The number of players in the game and the number of people coming in with credit cards to actually supply the Plex will ebb and flow depending on how playable and entertaining the game is, right? So if you look at, say, the scenario in a pre-2011 era where the population was consistently increasing, that's a completely different scenario than post 2011, where everything starts stagnating and flattening out. And there seems to also have been a lot of swapping out where the actual live and real people became, say, alt accounts instead. So you are looking at potentially a reduction of the original player base of maybe down by at least 30%. So we have pretty much been flattening out. That means that consumption and creation and destruction has shifted a lot, right? And it's no longer as balanced as it used to be. The fact that CCP then went and changed everything in the ecosystem, pretty much post the CSM that Mittens was on, right? Then you just start getting this stagnation and pretty much over stockpiling of everything. Everything starts getting devalued over time. The storage of wealth that you have with Plex, because it's got the utility of game access, is not really the only indicator you should look at when you're looking at the game. And the fact that CCP does not put the actual Plex value in their purchasing price index is just a little bit of a joke, right? Because that is exactly the thing that you want in a basket like that. In general, we've had this loss of connection with the ecosystem, with the macroeconomy, ever since AOC actually left. We had a little bit of an interim with Quant that helped fix things again, but then it just got lost, right? And the things that we've got over the past 10 years, things like almost infinite respawning anomalies, self-sufficiency in null, the raw core, skill point injectors, all of these things have just completely messed with the macroeconomics of the game. So all the things that were supposed to be there in the ideology of this game has pretty much been undermined by CCP's design.
And Caleb, I actually wanted to talk specifically about that, because I think we need to go over some of the other changes that were in the update, because I think that also goes exactly to your point. So one of the other things that they did is they started doing what Hilmar talked about a little bit in Eve London, about starting to redistribute resources across the map. And one of the things that they did was they pulled Noxium out of Crocite, and Crocite is one of the best, or at least it was one of the best nullsec basic ore types that you could mine in an anomaly. And after they nerfed Dark Ochre, it was the number one way to get Noxium. Noxium is a key mineral that you need for T1 ship production, T1 item production. And if you guys want to see, I'll put up on the screen here. This is what happened to the Noxium market when they made this announcement the other day. I mean, essentially, you can see for most of the year, and this is back to November. And if you go back even farther, I'll pull it back a little bit farther. You can see
isn't it?
You know,
it's panic.
I think
Every time you see
a change, you're going to see markets spike, right?
Exactly.
But let's talk about the Noxium change, right? So the idea behind it is, if people can't get Noxium in nullsec, then maybe they're going to have to go fight for it and mine for it, go to low sec where it exists. And my contention is we don't see that behavior in other regionalized commodities in EVE. You don't see people fighting wars over contaminated Lorentz fluid. You don't see people fighting wars over ice. You don't see people fighting wars over types of data cores that drop in different things. What you see is a trade hub driven market in which everything is brought to JITA or MAR and then hauled out as needed. So back in the years ago, back before Rorqual mining was a thing and before they changed the way reprocessing worked, people would literally move titanium by making it into, what was it, 425 millimeter guns.
Railguns, yeah.
Right? And so there was an entire economy based on hauling stuff in and out of JITA. And with some of the changes, it created some self-sufficiency where people weren't hauling as much back and forth. And my contention is that with Noxium not being that easily available in nullsec, the only change we're going to see in the game, because eventually the prices will return, is people will simply be bringing Noxium-bearing ore, compress it, and bring it out to nullsec where they'll reprocess it and use it. Just like I have to fly up to JITA to get contaminated Lorentz fluid because it doesn't appear in my space. And it doesn't cause my group to go to war to get contaminated Lorentz fluid. So I know people feel that this Crocite is somehow going to make a big change in the game. It's I don't know if it rises to the level of weaponized aggravation or inconvenience, but I don't know that it's going to create, like, Mittens, are you going to go to war for Crocite?
Well, I mean,
you're going to tell your people,
here's the question: is like, if they want
some money for another jump freighter.
Yeah, like, I mean, let's actually just let's take the thought experiment and follow it through to its logical conclusion. Let's assume that CCP's assertion is correct. I don't think it is, but assuming that they believe that if they take Nox out of nullsec, that suddenly players will fight wars over lowsec in order to get access to it. Let's give them summary judgment. Let's assume that that is accurate and then follow the chain of causality. So watch this. Every single region in nullsec has at some point a bordering region or two in lowsec. These regions are mostly unpopulated by and large. Or if they have population, it certainly does not have population at the level that an organized nullsec block can organize and conquer. And so, like, if we really needed to, which we're probably not going to, but if we had to, the Imperium could just say, okay, yeah, sorry guys, like Iridia is ours and it's the nearest to us, and just glass the damn thing. And then we just get the Noxium. So, like, the idea that the block level forces are going to compete with each other, when by definition, the way that the galaxy map works, there are low-sec regions bordering, the edge of all nullsec space, right? The closer you get to the center of the galaxy. Just means that these nullsec empires go, okay, well, we'll just conquer a bit of, our front lawn. We'll conquer that. And nobody can stop us because low-sec entities cannot stop a block that has a bug up its ass about something or other. And then we mine the Noxium. It's not going to happen because we're not going to need to, but hypothetically, does that solve anything that CCP wants to solve? Is that what they really want? Is that what they think is going to happen? Like, what the fuck?
I don't think that's what's happening, Mittens. If you look at what's been done and what this ties into, it's kind of potentially the best of both worlds, right? They will maybe allow, or it looks like they're going to allow self-sufficiency locally, but not when it comes to import-exports. If you look at the things that are being removed, it's the things that can be compressed and moved easily, right? So that is eventually going to be put back in a more balanced way and in a distributed way where there is difference in value between regions. So what you can mine and also export is going to change, but what you can supply yourself with locally to survive and build is going to have to stay there because it's too bulky and you can't easily export it unless you convert it into an actual final product, which will bring back the whole thing of actual trade and figuring out what is scarce in what region and which region is able to actually utilize the things that can be imported and exported. This is pretty much what I'm seeing, because I'm almost certain that CCP are going to put back a lot of the minerals, but they're going to put them back in the moon mining platforms, because moon mining platforms is one of the best ideas that CCP has ever had, in my opinion, because it's a player-controlled node spawn. Right?
I hear you, but right now, what they have announced in the dev blog is they are going to remove all asteroid ore from the moon extraction process. So there'll be no more asteroid ore in those drops.
Yes,
so all there is going to be is the moon ore, and the moon ore isn't movable because it's not compressible. So people simply take the moon ore, they bring it to their local reactor, or the reprocessing. They reprocess it into the moon materials, and that's what's hauled out because it's much smaller than the ore. So again, I don't think this changes anything in EVE. It's just which commodities do I haul and which commodities do I buy locally. I don't know that it's going to lead to conflict or change in EVE.
And that I think is exactly the point. And I want to make a comment, but then I also want to ask you guys a question, because I have my biggest concern when they're making changes like this is what is the ultimate solution? What is the ultimate problem or question that they're asking, that they're trying to come up with? And I'm going to ask you guys both what you think the basic fundamental reasoning behind this change was, because I can't figure it out. Let me finish what I'm saying, then I'll let you guys talk. But my biggest concern is exactly what you both just said, that this is not going to result in more conflict. It's just going to result in new jump freighter routes, because in the end, hunting jump freighters, that's something that the gankers in HiSec do. That's something that the guys with the push out stations and those types of things will try to do. But it's not something that your alliance level hunters are going out and doing. Whereas Rorquals are our bread and butter. They are easy thing. They are very expensive things, so they trigger fights. You'll get a response fleet. You'll be able to take fights, around them. It's common gameplay for a lot of PvPers. Whereas I can count on maybe one hand the number of times we've killed a jump freighter, and 99% of the time I'm out with the Goons ganking squad doing it. It's not something that you're going to do as a nullsec hunter. You're not going to take a random fleet out and hope you run into a jump freighter. You're not going to. So that's not going to create conflict, or at least content, the type of content that is being removed. And that's my biggest concern. You're taking something away. If you're going to do that, there better be something that you're giving back that is at least comparable, that provides some kind of benefit to the people that are losing it. Otherwise, they're going to get pissed and they're going to stop playing. That's my big issue. But back to my question, and what I want to tease out was, we've thought about this. Was this something that they were doing designed to create conflict? Was it because there were too many minerals? Is it because Rorquals are too good? What do you guys think is the fundamental problem that CCP is trying to address by doing something like this? Dunk, you go ahead first, and then Caleb.
Well, I think they've stated fairly clearly in the devlog that they want to do, right? They're doing things in phases, and they really want to change the way resources appear in EVE going forward in the future. And that's a goal that I share. I think it's good. Right now, it's extremely deterministic. When this anomaly, you're going to get this many cubic meters. When that moon pops, you know exactly what's going to come out of that moon. It's very deterministic. You can set your watch by it. When we have moons pop, the people are showing up 5 minutes before it. It's all gone in 30 minutes. It's very deterministic. You know what you're going to get. Having that be more random and dynamic and respond to the environment, those are awesome goals, and I want us to get there. So my feeling is they're trying to level the playing field a little bit of kind of tamping down on the economy, which is, makes a lot of minerals, so they can implement this new process. So I think that's the goal, and I think if done right, it could lead to people moving around more. If you didn't know that every Saturday at 1800, this moon pop with this ore, and you never knew what it was going to be, and suddenly realize it's super valuable and you want to get over there, it could create more people in space in different locations, which can lead to more conflict. So I think long-term, that's the goal. I think we're only seeing step one, and people are like, either they're applauding or they're WTFing, because we haven't seen everything yet. But I don't think these moves in and of itself are really going to change the needle. It's just a little bit of weaponized inconvenience right now.
Good
Caleb,
line. Caleb, what you thought?
Well, I think you're partially right, but you're not looking at this in the long perspective, because to me it looks like finally CCP have figured out that they need to return to some of the original vision. And I'm sure, well, Dunk is kind of old, but Mittens has pretty much been playing since all the way back in the early days, right?
Mid 2005,
exactly,
when I started.
right? Back then, you had
feel like the new kid.
The fundamental distribution of something like minerals, right? It was scattered so that there was always potentially a bottleneck, regardless of where you live, right? There was also always something that you were short of, and you also had the fact that the different factions had different things that they were using more than other factions. So they would have these benefits and they would have downsides to how they would have to create their doctrines and what ships to build, right? So you would have Minmatar space would be different than say Caldari space, and the distribution of minerals was so that there was a almost forced exchange of things. You had to exchange things across borders, or at least take it to the big trade.
Well, I don't know if we exchanged across borders or it all went through trade hubs.
Yeah, of course. That's what I'm saying. You either
what we have now with moons is they are regionalized in some way. In the two regions that my group operates in, there is a single polasite moon, only one, and it makes one thing that we need: cesium. Now, other places got cesium coming out their ears, but we have one moon, so it's very important to us to mine every bit of that one moon, and we still have to haul some in.
The
so
point is that
we already have. We already have a regionalized in some way. You can't compress polasite; it has to be done locally. So, again, we already have some regionalization. I don't know, by changing the characteristics of one mineral, we're going to see a great change to the way the EVE economy works that we don't already have.
Well, if you're looking at it in isolation and not looking at all the other things that are potentially coming down the pipe. When you consider things like how the changes to the loot fairy could change the incentive driver of PvP in small.
Those are future hypothetical changes, right? Things that CCP may possibly, they promise they might do, but we have no actual evidence that any of that. Like, I agree with, like, if you accept Caleb's premise, I agree with what he's saying, because he's saying that they could do this based upon an original vision and things like that. And I think the concern that Dunk and a lot of us have is that after the blackout, after the drifters, after all these things, we're sort of at this juncture where when CCP say that they're going to do something now, and then like a month from now, sunshine and fucking rainbows, we're all kind of going like,
but compared to
what's really
structure drops, right? If they wanted to make changes to how structures operate when it comes to things like how easy they are to destroy and what they actually drop, right? So the whole asset safety thing. If they took the time to actually say, okay, the thing that will drop is, say, tier 0 and tier 1 raw materials, regardless of where they are in your structure, then you have a completely different scenario, because then you get this whole incentive to actually go and aggress against these things, and it actually creates a downside. It's the burning of farms and fields, right? You can disrupt the actual farmers when they're on the field. That's not going to be extremely efficient. Or you can actually wait till they get that storage into the actual silos, and then you can aggress. And then you can actually get cheap materials, or at least free materials, for your purpose. If you don't have a mining branch or an industrialist branch, you can then do that whole raiding thing, right? Be Vikings or.
Well, but I think you're talking in a lot of things that don't exist right now, right? That are conceptual things that you might have that CCP might not share. I mean, I have an idea that I know would cause huge wars in EVE. If there was a battle over something and the winner got to fly a giant golden space penis over their keep star, we would see the biggest war in EVE to get that goddamn thing.
Space penis.
So like we can always talk.
And it's got nothing to do with what I just said, because it's
absolutely
structure changes are coming. We know that they are going to.
How do you know that? How do you know that?
For 3 years.
Well, that doesn't mean anything.
I'm on the CSM,
I mean, to be fair,
and I don't know that these things are coming.
Yeah.
So
you guys
I'm not
have
sure how you know they're coming.
I agree with Dunk on this one.
How do you know that these changes you're imagining are coming?
But that's
confusing.
But I hear this is what I get frustrated with CCP is the lack of communication, and we get little snippets, and that we factor that in. All right, they mentioned this in a dev blog 4 months ago, but I can't go back and find it because it's too hard to search anything. But I know they said something, but maybe they're going to do this and maybe they're going to do that. And in the end, all we have is really what they're saying they're going to do. So let's dial it back a little bit and focus on the next aspect of these changes. We already talked about the Noxium change and some of the other changes. They moved some of the different metals around in high sec and low sec. They reduced the size of the ore in the anomalies, and that kind of screwed Rorquals. And then they announced in the same day in a separate dev blog, teasing out that they're going to completely change moon mining again and change, basically essentially remove basic minerals out of moon mining, which I think everybody was looking at the changes that happened on Tuesday and saying, all right, well, they're pulling this out of this and this out of that. That's fine. We'll just Rorqual mine for moons from now on. We won't worry about anomalies anymore. And now they're going to be removing basic ores out of the moon rocks, and they've announced that they're going to do this as part of their scarcity campaign. And I think at the end, all of this is attacking the supply side of how you get more material into the game. And I think that has a lot of impacts on how people play, what assets they put in space, what has value, what doesn't have value. And it also hits the meta, because if you're changing the process by which people are able to get and move around these basic components that they used to build ships, it's going to have an impact on fleet doctrines. It's going to have an impact on where you can fight, how long you can fight, how you sustain your logistics chains, because we're the meta show, we're not the FC chat. So I'm not talking about like which doctrine are you bringing. I'm talking about doctrines that are in existence and how do you use these. And I think for us, I'm concerned with that, because if all of a sudden, all right, nobody's going to use a T1 doctrine anymore because it's too hard to source the materials to build those things and then deploy them forward, then that's going to increase costs for everybody. It's going to cause inflation because everybody's going to start buying stuff, and the ship prices are going to go up. T2 ship prices are going to go up because they're going to be the things that we use because it's easier to build them when you don't need as much T1 materials. And that has an impact downstream of a whole bunch of stuff. And I don't know if CCP is paying attention or cares about that stuff. If they're solely focused on something like there are too many minerals in the game, or we let Rorquals mine too much for too long. And I think those are the types of questions that I'm concerned are being asked, and they're getting the wrong answers. Because my solution to this has always been demand side.
I think you're missing the important
Blow stuff up and create, make it more expensive to build stuff in terms of material costs, and you'll get rid of those stockpiles. You don't have to change the amount that's entering. But Caleb, you were going to disagree with me.
I'd just like to point out that when you look at it, when you bring something in like moon mining, which is actually a really good design, but you leave all the other things in there, they're not going to take over as they are supposed to, right? This is one of the, I think it's one of Mitten's favorite words, right? Unassailable wealth. If more of the mineral sourcing was shifted onto moon platforms, right? That is an assailable node. Whereas anomalies is something that is in the wild, that you can just keep cycling forever. And when someone comes and tries to disrupt you, you can pretty much just turtle up, right? You can't turtle up if you've got something on the line. If you've got invested infrastructure out there, that is the thing that is sucking all that roid and giving you access to all that mineral, right? If that's something that can be destroyed by an enemy, then you're putting skin in the game for all parties. This is why I keep saying, if something like, say, 90% of what was currently the wild minerals was shifted onto the actual moon platforms, that would be extremely healthy for the game. I don't like this starvation phase, and I don't like this very almost binary thing that CCP are doing. We have talked about the fact that it might be needed in a short period to then shift over to the new, right? But the fact that you can go and burn the farm is extremely important for the game health. And I think we should at least lobby CCP to put back the mineral capacity, but put them on the moons.
Caleb, the thing though with your point is, real quick, Mittens, I understand what you're saying. Here's the problem, and I think Mittens can talk about this more in detail than I can because he's the Alliance leader, not me, but I'll say this. When you're hitting the farm, but you're not hitting the granary where the storage is, where all the grain is stored, then great, you're going to make it harder for people to get minerals in the short term, but it doesn't do a lot to those who have built stuff up. And that one of the things that I see with the scarcity thing is this is a massive, massive benefit to large alliances like Goons, like Init, like NC Dot, groups that have their stuff together, that have built a ton of assets, who have a ton of mineral wealth, a ton of ISK wealth, liquid wealth, that have a ton of assets. They have tons of Titan fleets and things like that. Those already exist. This doesn't touch any of that stuff. All it does is impact the smaller groups who are trying to get there and trying to chase. So it's to the extent of they're basically pulling the ladder up after us after we've already gotten where we are. You think that's fair to say, Mittens?
Yeah. I want to talk about this for a bit because just from a zoomed out. So first of all, look, I have a very jaded perspective about this game, and I have a very jaded perspective about promises of future anything from CCP, because having been in the position that I'm in for either as the number 2 like spy guy before I became CEO in 2010, in some capacity, I've had I've seen a lot of situations where there's a promise of a future iteration that never comes to pass, or some sort of thing that is promised of, when Torfi gets up on stage and talks about his future vision, and, when Siegel talks about how there's totally going to be player built Stargates or whatever. My attitude, and I deal with this in directorate meetings like every single week, is always, we'll burn that bridge when we come to it. I do not trust a thing that CCP says until I see patch notes that are coming for what is happening. The dev blogs, I literally just fucking ignore, because the only thing that matters in my world as the leader of the fucking Imperium is what is actually going to hit the damn code base, right? So here is the question that we have still not figured out an answer to on this. Like, okay, sure, maybe hypothetically it would be a more fair and a better system to eventually add regular materials into Moon Goo and whatever. But let's say hypothetically that you spent the last 3 or 4 or 5 years convincing tens of thousands of people that they really needed to both get a shield and an armor Titan. Not just one, you needed one of each. And then let's also say hypothetically that one day you decide that you want to go blow up Vince Draken again, because that's just sort of what you do when you get bored. It's time to go glass tribute or whatever. Let's go blow up Vince, high fives all around. And one day you end up with 1,100 Titans going north. And that was last year. And you guys have seen the MER charts, right? So what I want to know is, considering that so much of what makes a super capital ship, the strategic assets that define who rules the galaxy, and I'm totally cool with this if this is how it goes, but let's say you've got, I don't know, 2,500 Titans, God knows how many super carriers, God knows how many fax machines, and you've lost track of how many keep stars you have, and then CCP goes through and they're totally going to fix it later, but they kind of make it such that nobody else can really mine things easily anymore, and we can't either because they nerfed the fucking anomalies. Yeah, so we've got like 2,000 plus Titans. How does anybody catch up to us? Because I mean, I'm cool. I'll take the fucking win. But the fraternity guys, our spies are all through this fucking galaxy, and we have watched, after a couple of years of lag time, finally our enemies and our competitors and our opponents going, hey, actually this super cap umbrella model, this thing works out pretty well. What the Imperium is doing, if we don't compete with that, these guys are just going to steamroll us. So when we glass tribute, NC Dot, of course, did the strategically accurate thing, and they went to the galactic northeast in order to try to do what? To mine, to set up an umbrella, and to shit out enough super capitals and titans to try to compete with the Imperium. And now, unfortunately, tragically, all of the empires in Nullsec have been dealt this severe blow, this terrible nerf, by which it will be very hard for us to produce new super capitals because we cannot simply strip mine low ends. And so, I guess I'll have a Coke. I mean, I'm cool with it. I mean, it needs to happen eventually, but eventually.
You're not wrong, Mittens.
Yeah,
you're not wrong. But
I was so aggressive there with my flippancy that I knocked my camera over. Sorry, guys.
But what you're describing fundamentally, at least if I may use an allegory, it's pretty much the benefit of being chip king at a poker table, right? That's a huge benefit, but it doesn't make you capable of just winning by that. You still have to actually play right.
I think it's a lot easier to be the chip king at the poker table and play right if you have a couple thousand Titans. Like, just saying. Now, I could be wrong, but from my position of apparently the official biggest jerk in the galaxy, everything just gets a lot easier if you can double the number of strategic forces your enemies can put on the table, and everybody knows it and just kind of gets out of your way. So life just gets a lot easier, and I'll take it. I'm cool with it.
I think
in the past,
I think there's
right?
two very different problems we're talking about, right? There's two different problems. One is the economy of Eve, which Caleb and I probably agree long term much more than we agree on the short term. Okay. And I think there are adjustments to the economy that can be done that create opportunities for players to move around in space, to do different things, and to create trade and all that kind of stuff. I personally don't believe that the economy itself is going to change this super capital dynamic that we have. If we want super capitals to die, it has to be easier to kill them. It has to absolutely be easier to kill them. And I think a much better approach is, if we want all these Titans and supers to die, we got to make it easier. Imagine if you fire a Doomsday and you're basically in a siege mode where you can't get reps for 5 minutes. That would change the game. It would change the meta. So I think trying to think you're going to change one aspect in the economy and you're going to fix the super capital imbalance I think it's a bit of a stretch. So I think it has to be addressed in two different ways. If we want economic change and we want more for players to do and get in space and do different things and engage in trade, let's fix that. But trying to tie it completely to the super capitals and too many Rorquals and all this kind of stuff. If you want to nerf Rorquals, then nerf them. If you want to nerf Titans, then nerf them.
But that's not the point. That's not the solution. You're being dishonest.
I think it's absolute. I don't know if I'm being dishonest.
All right, look, motherfuckers, shut up. This is the Meta Show. Brisk and I are wearing our blazers until we go Jerry Springer mode.
Be good.
Keep it with it. Like, we're talking about, frankly, a topic that is, to a lot of our audience, at its core, skull-fuckingly boring here. There is no reason to be all like you're being dishonest or making personal attacks when we are talking about mining in anomalies. However, actually, instead of going into a big, long, scolding kind of thing about this and like herfing blurfs, I'm sort of stepping in because I realize we have herfed so many blurfs, gentlemen, that it's time for us to say our goodbyes, just as things were starting to get heated. But we might do a round 2 of this. We might come back because we don't really know what's happening with the economy. Things are changing. We don't know what's going to happen with CCP. Maybe Caleb knows, maybe Dunk knows. I am clueless. I'm just going to sit over here with my all my friends and their huge pile of Titans, and we're just going to try to figure out a way to get through the next day. Somehow we will get through this. But thank you all for coming and herfing blurfs. We actually haven't had kind of a testy show. So it's kind of cool. People are engaged. We had 500 plus people watching the show. Really happy to have everybody here. Thank you all so much. Some closing words, though, before we go. I promised everybody that we were going to do a really stupid political talk show. And that took off, and we have Grath Telkin is interested, and we have Dirk McGurk, we have Big Bill the Boss, Tuzzy is involved, Jay Amazingness is involved. We actually have so much talent involved in this that we're putting it off for a week because we want to do it right. So if you were wanting to hear a bunch of Eve nerds, like we're talking about like Neckbeard Nation or just a whole bunch of other dumb ideas for names, if you want to see some well-known Eve jerks talking about real-world politics for some reason because you have terrible brainworms, that's not today. That'll be next week. And Brisk, why don't you take us to the outro, please?
All right, everybody. Just want to say thanks for joining us again. I'm glad Dunk's got his Eve Vegas ticket. I bought mine yesterday. Check out evevegas2020.com. We all want to see you there in October. And obviously, we did not get to the Pearl Abyss fourth quarter earnings. We'll have that on next week. And maybe we'll bring these guys back. We don't know. We'll figure it out. But there's a lot to talk about. This is a very difficult subject, and it's got a lot of juicy stuff in it that has major impacts on the meta. So that's why I want to talk about it. But thanks for joining us here on the Meta Show. You stay classy, New Eden.